Hi there, and thank you for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. We feature those who are in the process of overcoming or have overcome any type of life encounter, life obstacle that at the time seemed to be almost insurmountable. With this podcast, we have three objectives in mind. Our first objective is we want you to know with a confident resolve you are not alone. We want to work with you. We want you to know there are others who are working with you, who want to help you through whatever you are encountering, and together we will get through whatever you're experiencing.
Our second objective is there are multiple options for any life encounter you are facing. We want to help you develop a resolve that there are various options and solutions to any life dilemma.
Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you're encountering something that was possibly a decision you made sometime in the past, and if you had the opportunity for a life redo, you would make a different decision. We want to help you with those critical thinking skills that can help you make an informed decision and not encounter what you're going through at the moment. We are the Cooper Culture, a veteran-owned business. We work with business personnel and families to develop and sustain connected relationship cultures within their families and organizations. That type organization is one where people feel wanted, appreciated, and genuinely a part of that organization. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty, who has helped me facilitate this podcast. Today we feature Dana Diaz for our second episode, where she goes further in unpacking where she learned about dealing with narcissists in her family, her husband, and she acknowledges she was 45 years under the domination of 3 different narcissists, and she's still under the influence of a narcissist. But Marty, it's a great opportunity to learn about narcissism, how to gain separation from. I think one of the most important things she said was a takeaway for me. You cannot change if you're continuing in the same environment. So you have to make a change. What are some other takeaways you got from Dana?
She's very articulate about being in a narcissist situation, but I agree with you when she said you can't heal staying in that situation. So she encourages people that are living like that with a narcissist. You just have to have the confidence that you will make it and that you don't deserve to be in this type of situation.
It's another great learning opportunity. Let's listen and learn together. Dana, it's good to have you back for a second episode. We are very encouraged that you are willing to talk about your past, and you were, I'm going to use the term, under the domination of a narcissist. I would strongly encourage our listeners to go back to that episode. Some of our listeners might be under the influence of a narcissist and toxic relationships, and we just feel that we're almost entrapped in that kind of relationship. And our listeners are very interested in your life experience. How can we get free of those type in capturing, snaring type relationships to lead a better life? Dana, it's good to have you back with us.
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm just so happy that I can provide some insight for anybody that's out there, even if you know somebody who might be in one of these types of relationships. You know, it's good to sometimes share a podcast instead of confronting them directly, because it's such a shameful thing for victims. They know what kind of circumstance they're in, and you know, they don't want to be in it any more than anyone else would. But you know, you do get trapped. There's so many things that keep you in that situation. So
thank you for your insights, Dana. One of the things we are about is awareness. I can only suppose, not having been through experiences such as you have been through, but for a person who's under the domination of, they may not want to discuss that with anyone, but maybe through our relationship, our interaction, becoming a safe space, if we are aware of different things that may just come out with one or two words in a conversation, but as we are aware of different things, different traits of a person who's under the domination of a narcissist, we can learn from your life experience and have the courage to engage. And I really think it's a matter of, I just personally don't think we have to be specifically trained in, and I'm not diminishing anyone who has various degrees, but if we are aware and we're willing to work with, through our friendship and our relationship, maybe we can help someone. That's kind of a long-winded explanation, Dana, but that's a lot of where Marty and I come from.
Absolutely. And I agree with you. And I don't think it takes a degree or anything. For me, I didn't go to school to become a doctor of narcissism. I unfortunately just experienced it since childhood because my mother married the king of all narcissists. And then I married one and spent 25 years. So 45 years and actually still counting because I'm 48 now. And I still have one narcissist in my life I just can't seem to rid of. But it's something that really it's a terrible thing to say, but you don't really get it until you've actually dealt with one, a really bad one, because not all narcissists are bad. And I think we covered that in the first podcast. There are some people that might have the qualities, including victims of abuse and people who've experienced trauma. They often exhibit narcissistic qualities, but where we look for the actual, I hate to call it a diagnosis, but where we try to put that label on somebody is in the intent. When somebody has malicious intent, when they intentionally want to harm somebody. So these are kids who are school bullies. These are adult bullies. These are people at work that are jealous and take credit for your work or try to, inhibit your success. These are unfortunately sometimes your parents or your partners. They're everywhere. So you can't avoid them. And I think that in sharing our experiences, like you say, it just helps people to be aware of where they might encounter some of these issues in their own life or, see it in the life of their loved ones.
Let's talk a little bit about your parents only from the context. I want to make sure our listeners understand we're not here to blame, but it was just a part of your life
Yeah.
and you learned from and maybe needed to get some separation from. And I'm not trying to decide or describe what you did, but you, through your life experience, learned that your dad was a narcissist and you're under in his influence. And you, I mean, to a degree, that's all you knew. So you married a narcissist, and it wasn't until after you're able to put things in a perspective that you made the separation from, it seems. And again, Dana, if I've described anything is not exactly right, please tell us. But our listeners are very interested in knowing, how did you make somewhat of a safe separation? Maybe it's not a matter of, I'll never talk to you again, mom and dad, but I just need to
Well,
make the separation or whatever you call it.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. There's this thing that we say that you can't heal in the environment where you got sick. So unfortunately, it is kind of common knowledge in the realm of abuse and narcissism and, just any kind of situation where, it could be with rape, it could any kind of traumatic experience. There's no way except to cut ties with those people. That doesn't mean, I'm not saying that lightly, and I'm not advising anybody to do that. Everybody has to do what they feel comfortable with. But I mean, I'm 48 years old. I'm always going to want my mommy, but I never had a mother. I had a woman who was forced to have me. I was a teenage pregnancy. She had me. She didn't want me. She never tried to really be my mother. I think maybe she did once or twice. There were glimpses of what a mother could be, but she was always emotionally detached, physically detached. And then when she married this man who then abused me physically and verbally, um, she turned her head. She would put it on me. I became the scapegoat. Well, if you didn't make him mad, if you weren't so sensitive, you wouldn't feel this way. He didn't do that. He didn't say that. You're lying. It always got turned around on me. And this is common with narcissists, because I would venture to say my mother is a type of narcissist. There's different types, but I was made to feel that I was to blame for the abuse that was inflicted on me. So in my situation personally, which I just finished up writing my book about my childhood experience, because this has been such a big topic since my first book came out about my former marriage, is how did you get, how did you come to submit yourself, so to speak, to a situation like that? Well, I didn't, but my childhood, I hate to say, kind of primed me for it. I'm a little more tolerant than most people because of what I've endured. Tolerant is not necessarily a good thing in that situation. But if I had been raised in a healthy environment by parents who loved me and wanted me and encouraged me and supported me, gave me a sense of esteem and worth and deservedness, I'd have never, ever let even a minuscule amount of the things that happened in my first marriage, there wouldn't have been a marriage. There wouldn't have been more than 3 weeks of dating, because that's when the first angry outburst happened and the first thing went flying across the room at me. I would have said, nope, that's not acceptable. I deserve better. I'm out. But I was raised to think that I didn't deserve better. And I appreciate you saying that. I get a lot of, heck from some people, because there are a lot of people out there who say, oh, well, stop blaming the parents, stop blaming the parents. Unfortunately, childhood does impact somebody's psyche for the rest of their lives. There are many studies psychologically, and I encourage people to look into this if they're interested more. But they say by the time you're 7 years old, for lack of better words, you're already wired. Life experiences will affect you, things will affect you, but your idea of roles and your place in the world and your sense of, kind of how things should be and what's right and wrong is developed by 7. And that's by watching the people, whether they're your parents or whoever has raised you. It comes from that environment, how you're nurtured or not nurtured, for that matter. And it's even how narcissists are created. It's in childhood. Either they are overexalted by the parents, made to feel that, yes, they are actually superior to everybody else and the rules don't apply to them and they deserve more than anyone else deserves, or they are neglected in some way. And even if they're like with my ex-husband, it's interesting because I loved his parents. I was very close with his parents, loveliest people, but he perceived that in childhood he was neglected. His sister was the golden child, she was favored, and so he saw that slight. He interpreted that as a sort of neglect. And that's how he became a narcissist, because he then sought in his adult life to feel that superiority, that he tried to basically get that admiration and praise from others, but in using tactics that, a lot of these things narcissists do are things that our military does, like, the silent treatment for weeks, acting like you're not even there. They don't even see you in the room. They refuse to talk to you, or, the manipulation. We talk about gaslighting, which that's another word that's thrown around a lot, but it's basically when somebody negates, the reality. Like I could say, oh, the sky is blue today. And my mother's a supreme gaslighter. She would say, no, it's not. You're seeing it wrong. Are your eyes okay? And after repeated instances of this, like every single day, you start to really doubt if you're even of sound mind. They call it crazy making, but there's so many things that come at you when you're in these relationships. And God forbid, like me, I had my mother, my stepfather, and my husband, all, 3 narcissists coming at me from all different directions in different ways. It kind of makes your head spin a little bit, and certainly causes a disruption in your mental processes, and then your physical manifestation of that distress. It's overwhelming.
You mentioned something very important just a minute or so ago. You must get away from the environment you are
Yes.
in to heal. But Dana, I'm thinking that a lot of our listeners may be thinking and just realizing the environment in which you were in, your upbringing, followed
Hmm.
by your marriage, that's all you knew. And
Yeah.
so it may have required a person outside of you to say, Dana, this is the way things are, to help you realize. I'm just thinking, Dana, that it almost, maybe it did take someone outside of your family and marital relationship to help you realize, hey, you're under the domination of, and you've got to change. That is, yeah, I'm asking you to repeat just a little bit of what we talked about in the first episode, but can you describe who it was, what the process was to help you realize, yes, I've got to change what I'm doing?
Well, like I said before, I think it's an internal thing. I mean, we all, even though I grew up that way, I mean, my great grandma was very loving. She treated me in my heart, she was my mother. She was very, nurturing and soothing and tended to me emotionally, physically, in every way. So I knew what was wrong and what wasn't. And even as a kid growing up, I would observe other families. I'd go to my little girlfriends' houses and, see their mom and dad and how they interacted and how we interacted with siblings and all that. So I had a sense that, oh, this is nice. We can sit at the dinner table here and have conversations and laugh and joke versus at home. I don't even know if there would be dinner. And maybe I was just going to eat a handful of cereal for dinner and that was it, and go to my room and lock myself in there because God forbid we interact, because there will be a fight. So, it's hard to say. There's just so much going on. I just really feel the childhood definitely impacts people growing up. I'm losing my train of thought here. I've got so many thoughts swirling in my head.
No, I think what's very important for our listeners to
For
understand,
when people come in.
it appears your great grandmother was a very positive, I'm going to use the term subliminal
Yeah,
influence. In other words, you through, maybe through her, you knew there was something better,
right.
and or at least something different. And it seems mentally you built on that, and you
Yeah.
had to develop the courage, perhaps through your great grandmother. You knew, okay, whatever it was of her influence in you at some point in your life developed the courage to make the change.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, yeah, so going with that, absolutely, that was correct. It's unfortunate though, because her generation, you don't talk about those things. I call it polite society. So she would always put her finger up to her lips and shh, don't talk about that, just take care of yourself. And that was the one thing I carried with me through my life, was just I have to take care of me. And I learned that especially after my son was born, because now we were both in this and suffering in different ways. It was my responsibility to take care of me so I could take care of him. And that kind of is what got me through a lot of that marriage, that 25 years. But yeah, there were a couple people. There were three people I can think. I mean, my neighbor certainly, unfortunately, heard and saw a lot, and she tried not to say anything, because I don't think anybody really tries to approach anybody and say, "Oh, well, I heard what happened," and we don't want to bring up bad stuff, usually with other people, especially if we don't know them that well. And then there was a lady at church, an elderly lady that sat behind me in the pew. And I remember once I was just, after communion, I'm Catholic, so communion takes forever. And I'm on my knees and just praying after I took communion. And I just remember just tears coming down my face because I was just so sad. But church was the one safe place I could go, that I knew nothing was going to happen to me, and I could just breathe for a minute. And so I had these tears running down my face. And as this elderly lady came after she had communion, she just squeezed my shoulder. And, she didn't know what was going on. She didn't know me even that much, except for seeing me in church every Sunday. But it made me feel seen in a way, like somebody saw me, somebody knew something was off, something was wrong. And I think that helped me to feel supported, but not in the way like, normally we have our parents or our siblings or family or friends, whoever, support us and say, I'm here for you. And if you need to talk, I didn't have that. And I wouldn't have talked to anybody anyway, because I was so terrified of exposing, what was really going on, because then what would happen if he found out? And you add the additional element of, he had moved me out of Chicago into this small podunk town where everybody knows everybody. And you know how that goes. The ladies go to the hair salon and talk all the gossip about everybody else, or the moms at the school waiting for the kids to get off the bus or whatever, talking about everybody's business. So, I didn't dare say anything, because I will say I learned to keep a good secret, because if you don't want people to know, you don't tell a soul. There is no telling your best friend or your whoever and saying, don't tell anybody. You just don't tell anybody. So I didn't. I kept it inside, but that's what ended up hurting me in the long run, was because I was keeping all these feelings in. I was keeping in all this grief and everything I was enduring. And, some have told me, that reading my book or learning about these experiences that I'm speaking about, that, if only I had been stronger, and, why were you so submissive? I'm going to tell you what, it takes a stronger person to endure that, knowing what they're enduring and knowing the suffering that you endure every single day, than it does a weak person. Could I have walked away? Possibly, but I don't know if I could have walked away with my son. There's something in the book that I never talked about, which was the animals. We had a small farm. I won't get too much into that, but we had some cows that passed away because they were neglected. He was violent with the pigs. The chickens, well, they run really fast, so they evaded a lot of the turbulence in our household. But even I had a dog that was epileptic, would have seizures. She also had lymphoma. I couldn't abandon her, and I couldn't take an 80-pound dog just wherever with me. So it's not just as easy to say, I'm just going to walk out. I wouldn't have had the financial ability to maintain another household and just, up and leave. He wouldn't have allowed that. I mean, we have to remember, some of these narcissists go so far. I mean, if anybody watches true crime shows, like my husband loves watching 48 Hours, that's what we fall asleep to every night in this house, this awful stuff. But these true crime shows, most of the time, I mean, I would venture to say 90% of the time, the person, the perpetrator, so to speak, the murderer, is some type of narcissist. These are people that, on the very severe end of that narcissistic spectrum, are the people that commit these domestic violence situations, and they are harming people physically, violently. They say that 20% of our male U.S. prison population can be identified as narcissists. I would venture to say it's more. There's female narcissists too, though, so I'm not picking on men, but it can get tricky. It's not as easy as saying, I'm sad, I don't like this person is treating me badly, I'm just going to leave. It's just not that easy. Even in a normal, well, I hate to use the word normal, but even in a marriage where there isn't fear and physical threat and fear for your life and your safety, it's not as easy just to walk away. Nobody wants to walk away from that. And the tricky thing with narcissists is that they are nice sometimes. They do make you laugh sometimes. You have great memories with them. But when it's bad, my God, is it bad? It's insufferable.
What is your book title?
Gasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse.
Great. And is that available on Amazon?
Yes, absolutely. Anywhere books are sold online, it is available in ebook and also the print book. And I say the ebook because I specifically wanted to make sure that anybody that's in a situation, it would not be safe for you to have a book that says narcissistic abuse sitting on your coffee table. So the ebook is available so that you can keep it on your, Kindle or your computer or your phone or wherever you read your books without fear of worrying about somebody finding out.
That is very perceptive forethought. I want to ask you, for the listener who is maybe identifying with a lot of what you're saying, and for the listener who wants to engage but they're uncertain how, is it helpful in hindsight, Dana? And now I'm asking for you to relive your evaluated life experience, but is it helpful for an outsider to be appropriately aware of, to engage in your life at only the speed at which you want to accept their friendship? I'm searching for words, but how can we help those who are under the domination of a narcissist?
Unfortunately, and I understand what you're saying completely. Here's the thing. Like I said, we all know if we're in that situation, we know we're in that situation. Even if we don't know what a narcissist is, even if we don't have the verbiage, our gut is telling us this isn't right and this doesn't feel good and this isn't good for me and it's not good for my kids, etc. Having a person come to you and say, "You got to get out, you got to leave, let me help you leave." Again, you are so terrified because you don't know how to break free from that, and we won't get, there's a whole other podcast to talk about the chemical aspect of it, that inside your body actually can become addicted, as mine did, to that cortisol, the stress hormone, where you're kind of bonded. They call it a trauma bond. You're bonded to that person. You don't know how to be away from them. um but it's a tricky thing. I think the biggest thing to do is just to let somebody know that you're there. Confronting them about it, making comments about it is just going to make them feel worse. It's going to make them feel devalued in their own mind, because then you think, oh, well, maybe I'm not strong. Maybe I am weak. Maybe they start questioning everything. You don't want to make a person feel worse. So I always tell people, again, the best thing to do, it's so hard to watch somebody going through it, but just a simple, you know, you seem kind of melancholy. If there's ever anything you want to talk about, let me know. Just leave it alone. Leave it at that. And I promise you, if you're safe, if that person sees that you are not going to judge them, you're not going to shame them, and they come to you, that's the biggest thing, is do not disbelieve them. Because I did try to kind of hint at things with some people I thought maybe I could trust with confiding in, and it was, oh, well, he seems like a nice guy to me, and it's like, okay, then I shut down. I'm like, okay, you're not my person to talk to. And it took so much more for me to summon up the bravery to try again with somebody else. So just don't diminish somebody, because we're not out on the street, looking for Chucky with his butcher knife and saying, oh, that's who I want to marry. No, these are handsome, charming, charitable and generous and, nice people in society, but behind closed doors, it's a different dynamic. So, just remember that what you see is not what that person is experiencing. And if they come to you and they do confide anything, even if you don't believe it, believe them, because that's their experience. And to them, it is real. Um, and it's a very scary thing to open your mouth and come forward about your abuser. So, the other thing I would say is just provide resources. Like I said before, sometimes just sharing a link to a podcast and say, oh, this was really interesting, you should listen to it. I always tell people, it's kind of like when my son was, 2 years old, he wouldn't touch a banana to save his life, but I left him with one of my friends once because I had an appointment I couldn't take him with me on. And when I came back, she said, oh, he loves bananas. I said, who are you kidding? He won't touch a banana. Well, no, not if mom gives it to him, but if somebody else gave it, then he was more open to it. So sometimes coming from somebody else, sharing that podcast link and saying, hey, this is interesting, you should listen to it. They can listen to it real quick on the way to the grocery store or to get the kids or whatever. and it might resonate, and then they might start looking into it and realizing things on their own.
Two things I want to pursue on behalf of our listeners. I do want to pursue, and it may be much longer term, your cortisol comment, the chemical
Yes.
dependency, I'm going to call it that.
Yes.
But I think one of the things I'm processing what you're saying, Dana, is be willing to listen and let them, the person who might be, at the point you're talking with them, you just suspect the possibility. Let them set the pace. Don't offer advice. Just be
Yes.
willing to listen. And maybe over a period of time, you can gain the confidence of that person. Am I processing correctly? Maybe how it
Yes.
was with you?
Yeah, I didn't really have anybody to go to because narcissists like to isolate you. They don't, I mean, they even remove you from family in little ways. It's very insidious, but it's, oh, well, do you have to hang out with that friend? Do we have to go to your family for Christmas? Can we just go to my family? Or I don't think your family likes me, so I don't want to go. Well, I don't want to be away from you on the holiday. Okay, well, we're going to go to my family. You know, they do these things to just put you in a little box so they're the only ones influencing you. But yes, if you do have an outlet, because some people might have, and we have to remember my situation was a little different because I didn't have a mother or father to go to. You know, my mother, the one time I went to her, one of the times that my ex was unfaithful, one of the times my mother said, well, you married him, you made a commitment. So, you know, and I was kind of astounded. I was expecting her to say, you know, that's wrong and you should reevaluate this and she didn't. So, you know, hopefully not everybody has that kind of parental guidance in their lives, but if you do have a parent or that sibling or that best friend that you can go to, yeah, absolutely. You know, just try to reach out because I think there are people out there. Now that I'm out of it, I can see that there were a multitude of people I could have gone to that would have taken me in a heartbeat with my dog and with my son, but I was so scared. I was so scared to ever let anybody even think an iota of what was going on because of all the shame that it carries.
I appreciate everything you're saying, your sentiments. I hope our listeners can fully understand and absorb what it is that encapsulates you. I mean, you're totally captured under the influence of. I want to ask you, Dana, would you consider coming back for what I sense would be another episode, but it's talking about cortisol, of which I was totally unfamiliar, but
Yes.
it sounds as if you're saying you've learned through your evaluated life experience there can be a chemical dependency of which,
Oh,
wow, I
100%.
didn't know about, but I'm going to suppose there's not a simple just snap your fingers a
Oh,
quick
no.
solution to that. That's longer term.
No, it is longer term, and it's what made me sick. It's what made me autoimmune is cortisol. Cortisol gave me a lung disease. Cortisol is responsible for transgenerational trauma because it passes in utero from a mother to a fetus. There's a lot there. So yes, absolutely, we can unpack that. And I'm certainly not a doctor, but because cortisol did make me sick, I know a little bit more than most about it. So I'm more than happy to share my knowledge and my experiences. I think it's definitely significant.
Dana, I want to say thank you. Now, we do have you on the schedule for another time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
You,
so let's focus, Dana, on cortisol. What I'm going to use the term chemical
Yes.
dependency, and I don't want to, we want to learn from your experience, but I think it's extremely important that we understand some of the, oh, let's say effects that are not
Yes.
necessarily immediately visible, but just have that understanding. My goodness, thank you, Dana, for being so open to share what you've learned. And again, I want to encourage our listeners, let's learn from your life experience. Let's have the courage to engage. And I've adopted the expression, I would much rather have to apologize than eulogize. And I'm not trying to be fateful about what I just said, but if we just have the courage to reach out, be willing to listen, engage with, we might just be the
Yes.
person who say, yep, you impressed me as being a safe space. And maybe through that association, we can help a person overcome.
100%. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dana, for sharing. And we look forward to additional episodes where we can help people through whatever life traumas they're facing.
Absolutely.
We appreciate having the opportunity to share our and our guests' life experiences with you.
The Cooper culture advances organizations to achieve and sustain high retention rates, connected communication, and trust through personality insights and principled leadership. You can contact us at our website, thecooperculture.com, and you can contact us directly at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at thecooperculture.com. We work with you to help assess aspects of your culture to advance the environment and people to their best performance. We do that through our staff of certified personal performance coaches, leadership trainers, keynote speakers, and DISC personality behavior experts. You can book a speaking engagement directly through our website by contacting us at ron@thecooperculture.com. We look forward to sharing our life experiences with you, some of which are profound, some of which are pretty funny. Some of those life experiences are ones we'll never do that again because we've been through stuff. We truly look forward to working with you, speaking with you, helping advance you in any way that we can.